to start by having our panel introduce themselves, and since we're still hooking up there, let's start right here.
Hi, everybody. Oh, there's a nice signal. That's nice and bright. Ooh, there you go. My name's Joe Shanahan. I work at a nightclub called Metro. I've been working at Metro for 35 years. I did go to school at Columbia, just so you know, that you're students at one time. I love what I do, and I'm still doing it 35 years later.
I'm Jeff Morrow. I teach voice at Columbia. I'm also the vocal producer for the television show Empire. I'm vocal contractor for Aretha Franklin. And I've done jingles, commercials, record, background vocals, arranging, and contracting since 1980 in Chicago.
My name's Andy Cirzan. I work at Jam Productions in Chicago. I got my start in the music business when I did my grad school internship at Ravinia. And when I was done with the internship, they offered me a full-time job to start a jazz and contemporary music series. I booked that for 3 years and got a phone call from the owners of Jam asking me if I knew anything about rock and roll, and I had any interest in going to work there. And I've been there 30 years now, and I'm currently the vice president of the concert division. I primarily book theater shows and arena shows, and even shows at Wrigley Field now. So that's my gig.
On the other scale, my name is Tim Tuten, and I own a bar called the Hideout. It's up at Wabansia Street, and it's a little bar, and I've owned it for 20 years with my friends, and I'm the president of the Hideout. It's a place where you get started on your way to Wrigley Field.
Unless you're a good baseball player.
I'm Bobbi Wilsyn, and we are to talk about, in this panel, how to get on stage. So the thing that I want to make clear is that I would not be a professional, that is, getting paid for what I do, unless I designated early on several stages that I could use in order to present many facets of my talents that I've been given. Obviously, I'm a teacher, but I'm also a jazz singer. I've done voiceovers, I've done jingles. I'm a paid soloist in church. I do backup singing for people if they think that I will be good enough for them. And I've been known to break out in song in front of my refrigerator when the light comes on. So anything can be a stage. But because we have these experts here, I want to know, on top of what we've talked about in all of the master classes and panels that include technique and style and discipline, stage presence and methodology, and also history, those things that can contribute to this development of the artistry on this journey of being a professional, how you can perhaps tell us, under the circumstances that you might meet these up-and-coming performers. Anyone may start.
Well, I'll be glad to start. Being a vocal contractor in town, I meet people in various ways, a lot of times through recommendations from other people. And one thing I always mention to my students, I'll say this, you have all these great ensembles and great groups here at Columbia. Be very careful how you handle your business in those classes and in those situations, because somebody from that class is going to end up a famous producer, a famous artist, and they're going to go back and go, I need a bass player. And I remember this guy at Columbia, and he was great. He was on time. He was this. He was very dependable. A recent example, I had a band leader in Chicago that does jobbing, that work every weekend, called me and said, I've already have 2 of your students hired in my band. I need 1 more male singer. And I said, well, I'm going to give you 2 names. I said, you run them by your background singers and see what they say. I gave it 2 names, and I knew what they're going to say about one. Fantastic singer. But the first thing the other background singer said was, oh no, he's not dependable. We had him in class. We worked with him before. Yeah, he's great, but we don't know if he's going to show up. So how you handle your business now, how you handle your business with your peers is going to reflect later on. Everything that I do right now stems from something I did over the past 35, 36 years. My contracting job with Aretha Franklin, the MD was a jingle producer that I worked for 20 years ago. She wanted new background singers. She wanted a new person to run that. He said, I got the perfect guy. He's going to get those singers for you. They're going to be ready for every show. You can bet it's going to be on point, and they're going to be right what you need and nothing more, nothing less. So everything you do, the job with Empire that I do right now, came through another producer who's I think in the building with you, Jam. Are you in the engine building? Is that where Jam is now?
No, we're in Old Town.
No.
Old Town, okay.
Yeah.
Ira and Tellis and a couple of entertainment attorneys heard Empire was looking for somebody to vocal produce in Chicago. So when they send the tracks from LA, they come to Chicago, I do the work in Chicago. And wouldn't you know, next week I'm going to LA to do tracks in LA. Why? I don't know. But that happens. Nice. The weather's nice and they like me, so that's a good thing. But that's another situation that came from people that I've worked for in the past. Everything you do will come back and either bite you or help you. So you always want to make a good impression, work hard, be dependable, be rock solid, be prepared. You know, I talk to singers all the time. I say, okay, you're in a recording situation. In that situation, there are musicians who already think singers aren't musicians. You're in school to be a musician and a singer. Learn that theory. Use it, not only learn it, utilize it when you get in work situations. Speak to the musicians, the other musicians, in musical terms. Be prepared. Know what you're supposed to do. Don't get there to learn your music. Know it when you get there. So just be prepared.
So basically, they would come in contact with you.
Absolutely.
In a voiceover situation.
Voiceover situation, private lesson situation.
As a contractor.
Yes.
As a coach. Mm-hmm. Okay? How about somebody else? How will these students in the audience see you on this journey of developing their profession?
I think it's very interesting what you said, because I work in sort of a couple different levels as far as promoting shows here in Chicago. Smallest venue is the G-Man Tavern, which is about 100 capacity. The Double Door, which is about a 500 capacity, and then Metro, 1,100 capacity. I also keep a keen eye on what Tim does at Hideout, because of the fact that he has a very unique sort of brand of musicians and that work within his framework. Some call it me all country or Americana, you know, kind of in that indie side of things. I keep an eye on that. But the interesting thing is that it is about sort of conducting yourself as forthright, honest, straight, and dependable. I think that is clearly something that when I see an artist that gets a shot at playing at Metro or Double Door, and when they really come in and they're ready to go, and, you know, barring that they're not sick or something like that, of course, but really take it very seriously, those are the ones I keep an eye on. And that's the ones I really like to work closer with, because they're taking their craft, their art as serious as I'm taking my business.
So they would actually see you as the person who books those venues that you just mentioned?
Well, I'm not necessarily booking every single show. We have several talent buyers in all of those venues. But the shows that I go to, you know, if I show up, you know, sometimes it's for sound check or sometimes for the entire show, you know, that's the kind of, you know, energy I'm looking for. We all may know this one artist named Jamila Woods, right? Yeah. So, you know, when she played Double Door, you know, I got there early. I saw her kind of sound check. I saw how she put her band together. I met with some of the people that were around here, and then I stayed for the show. I couldn't wait to have her play Metro. So because I could sense that not only did I like the music, and I've been watching, you know, Greg Kot write about it or whoever else, whether it's, you know, people like the closed sessions people or Fake Shore Drive. You know, I'm watching those. Those are indicators for me. But when I saw her perform and how serious she was, sober, on point, dependable,
That's right.
showed up at 3 for sound check, ready to go on stage at 7:30. And I tell you, I look at that and say, that's a good start.
So if you like me, and I show those kinds of characteristics, you'll be in my audience and you'll sign my check.
I am signing the check, that's for
See?
sure.
Okay, that's where we'll see you.
I think what you're saying, I mean, what these guys are saying, I can tell you, we're in Chicago. This is a great city to be, all right? And we have this thing always about New York and LA. We can't even talk without mentioning those places. But in Chicago, we talk about our community here. So not only do we see you, and we see you. So at the little club like the Hideout, I always have bands coming in that have never played a show, Columbia College kids or whatever, and I'm watching that, and so is my staff. You know, there's 30 people that work at the Hideout. So Sully, who actually does the programming, he's only 24 years old. And my bartenders, they're 21 and 23, and the door people, the sound people, we're all watching what's happening not only in Chicago but around the country, and we're keeping track of like the Chicagoans that moved to Brooklyn, you know, and seeing how they're doing. And the Chicagoans in Brooklyn are telling us about the bands. They're like, check out Lady Lamb, you got to hear her, right? And then we're like, okay, that's cool. The thing about Chicago is we really, it's not, it sounds corny in Midwest. We have a community here. And so not only do you impress the owners of the clubs or the agents or other people, like we kind of figure out who you hanging with and what's your gang, who's your group, right? So like we mentioned Jamila Woods, right? And we mentioned No Name, right? And then we start thinking about, oh yeah, Donnie Trumpet, we knew him in high school, right? And then wasn't he with Chance back at Whitney Young High School or something? And then over here, there's Seema Cunningham, and then there's Macy Stewart, and they were in the Kids these days, right? And then they're over there in Humboldt Park on the Social Experiment. So that's a classic example of what's happening right now. Chance is on Saturday Night Live, right? He's the biggest thing in the world. He'll be at the Grammys, but he's remembering that there's No Name, okay? And it's such a small town, but such a town that believes like working with each other, you just be surprised. So like when somebody like at the Hideout, we do a lot of comedians, okay? And why is that happening? Well, we were just doing it for fun. Like right now we have Late Breakfast while I'm talking is going on. And it's a bunch of just crazy people doing crazy stuff. But Hannibal Buress showed up, you know, a few years ago, and like he did a thing there, and then he goes to New York, and he tells Michelle Wolf and Phoebe Robinson, check out the Hideout. And then Cameron Esposito, she's over at Kohl's, and then she comes by. You know these people I'm talking about, right? And what happens is people really do recommend other performers. They say, check this out. And then we're watching too. So we are watching you guys. Right. And what we're looking at is this interesting difference that these guys are talking about. Is this person just a hobby? Is this just a Trustafarian or a Trustafarian who actually sings well, all right? It's great. Or are they really into it, you know? Are they really into it? And then we just start figuring that out. We watch, you know? And you start at a place like the Hideout on a Wednesday night, you know, on a 3-band bill. And literally, you can go to, there are many smaller clubs. There's Township, and there's all these house parties that are going on, you know? And so all those kids in Twin Peaks, you know, I'd be like, I don't want to hear about the house party, man, you know? And all that. Just make sure everyone who comes to the Hideout's 21, because here we're going to lock down that shit, right? You know? But so there's a whole bunch of stuff going on, and then, but people connect here.
Right.
You know?
Tim's right about the community aspect of things. Like, for instance, an artist that I started working with when he was like in one of his first bands, an artist by the name of Andrew Bird. He was in, what's it called, Andrew Bird's Bowl of Fire.
Yeah.
And before that, he was in the Squirrel Nut Zippers.
Yeah.
So we were following this. And then, of course, when Andrew began to really, you know, rise as an artist, now Andy Cirzan works with Andrew Bird at the Fourth Press Church or Chicago Theater or the Auditorium.
Pritzker Pavilion.
Yeah, and
Park,
hence that's where, you know, like the Hideout to Metro to the Pritzker Pavilion, and these 3 guys. I mean, we do this. We're looking for those opportunities for all the right reasons.
But one
Yeah.
thread that has carried thus far through everything. We're not going to put our name and our stamp on anyone that we see that is flaky, that anyone that we see is not dependable. We have to know that you're going to be a hard worker. We have to know that you're going to get out there. And if I say, well, Jeff Morrow said that you're going to be this and you're going to do this, that you're going to do that.
And
It's
the
very simple.
And the
Absolutely.
infrastructure that you work within, your manager,
Absolutely.
your agent, your friend, your street team, down to all of that. It's true.
It is a real reputation that Chicago has that we actually believe in, because we look at, like, when you think about this, like the Metro, the Hideout, Shoe Biz, the Empty Bottle, there's something, these are bars that have been around a long time, okay? So you just call up the people in LA and go, what's up over there? And they're like, oh, this new club is under new management and there's all this. And in Brooklyn, we can't afford to have a club, or, Brooklyn, they just got bought by AEG. Who's the guys? The Bowery Presents just got bought by AEG. Out there are all these kind of crazy business, corporate stuff going on. But in Chicago, we are a real city, and we have real performers. This is the town where Mavis Staples is, playing. And so we are like the town that we are like, our performers are real and authentic, and they care. And it's really for real. So even a guy like Andrew Bird, who's living in Los Angeles now, right? Doing all that music for Zach Galifianakis, his show Baskets and stuff like that. Andrew Bird is a local kid who went to Northwestern, who literally made a tape back in those days, a cassette, and he went around to bars and was like, I'd like to play, I have this swing thing going on. And and then over time he developed and created this new type of music, and he met different performers. So if you look at the Bowl of Fire and you see how it evolved, he's just a good example of a little example. He just kept trying looping and electronic stuff and listening to Fiona Apple and seeing how that made sense with swing music, whatever. He just kept doing things, playing the Abbey Pub and all that. And through that determination, he then got, in those days, you'd get on a label, and then he's bigger and bigger. But notice, he's not playing the he played the United Center, right? Recently with the Lumineers or something?
The Lumineers, yeah.
He's opening. One of the things about Chicago bands, I always look at it like, okay, U2 and all the bands out of Europe or whatever, they play the massive football fields. Our bands play the Chicago Theater. Our goal is to get to the Metro, all right? If you can get to the Metro, we're you're rocking it now, and you're real. And then you're gonna play at the Chicago Theater and then the Auditorium. And then by the time you get to Wrigley Field, we figure that's like a legacy act. Well, that's Eddie Vedder, right? But what I'm saying, we think it's cooler in Chicago to be an awesome performer who's a good person, who's part of a larger group, than to be and everything I just said is wrong when we think of Kanye, okay, because he's one of us. But right, because we love him, and he is part of a group of people that, anyway.
Andy, jump on in here.
Sorry.
No, okay, well, I'm in a little different position because, I typically start to work more directly with talent at about the 3,500 seat theater level and go from there. As vocalist goes, one of the things I did last year is I produced the first 5 dates of the Adele U.S. tour. So, but having said that, these guys are my contemporaries, and I'm a lifelong Chicagoan, and our company has a super active club department. We start producing events, clubs as small as Shoe Biz, and we own the Vic Theater, we own the Park West, Riviera. We do shows with Joe, occasionally at the Metro.
When I'm lucky.
Yeah, and Joe is also partners with us on some of the things that come through the club that he and I worked together on. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, no matter what level of producers are up on this panel, we all know each other. We all pay attention to each other. We're all music guys. I started off in playing violin in second grade orchestra, and I figured out it wasn't going to work out for me, so I went back to school and learned how to do something else. The point being, though, that I'm in those clubs, okay? I might be doing the Foo Fighters at Wrigley Field or Adele, but I'm at the Hideout. I just saw Interview
Yeah.
Q there.
Yeah,
It was awesome. And, you know, I went to the Metro the first time over 30 years ago. Got kicked out, as I recall. Sorry about that. The Order show.
What show was that?
Smoking pot in the Metro.
You were smoking pot.
Got thrown out. Now I can get free beer there. But anyway, my point is, like, there's in Chicago, you guys are really lucky because the guys that are the main producers of music here are interested in music, which is should be obvious, but really the corporatization of music is a pretty, I would say, global trend right now. And you're seeing lawyers and accountants and you know, money guys and now shareholders, things that were just unheard of when I started or Joe started.
Absolutely.
So you have a unique opportunity here to get out there and you know, show what you've got to people who aren't you know, specifically looking at you as a possible financial investment, who are interested in growing the music scene here and helping to support it and have access to all these clubs and opportunities. But the key is, how do you take advantage of that? And I think one of the things that I see in a lot of young artists is trying to get too specific about what you want to do musically early on. I think the main thing is to really have a broad-based ability to you know, fit yourself into any number of circumstances. Like if you're going to do recording work, you know, that's a career unto itself. It doesn't necessarily transfer into live performance or vice versa. What I would suggest to anybody is, you know, learn how to read music, learn how to fit into that environment. And but if you just live in the studio, that's where you're going to end up. And you may end up coming out the other end as recording background vocals for a big artist who grabs you and goes, let's go. But my thing would be way more like, get out there and diversify and explore a lot of different kind of musics. Get yourself onto these stages, even if it's a backup singer role in a small club, even if you don't make any money. I don't think anybody I know who's successful in the music business right now didn't start off dead broke.
That's right.
So experience as much as you can.
Yeah, I mean, when I got out of grad school, I went to work for Ravinia for free. I didn't even get paid.
Right. Right.
You know, and you know, it's like foot in the door and then show what you can do, but you don't want to narrowcast too much. You know, I think you got to, you know, like the scene here. The easiest thing to describe it is you know, it's non-formal. You're singing backup. You're like Kelly Hogan, or these people who are now, you know, doing major recordings with a lot of major artists. They didn't start off with any kind of predisposed plan other than they wanted to get out there and do it. And next thing you know, they're recording with Jeff Tweedy. They're doing stuff with Mavis. They're doing, you know, a lot of big projects. And you know, it didn't happen because someone found them doing jingles in a studio. They were out in clubs playing and actively pursuing it. And I think the other part of it is you kind of might need to do both. You might need to be able to be really well versed in going in and reading charts, like and knocking out jingles and getting your residuals and all that stuff. But you know, you in order to take advantage of everything that Chicago has to offer you, you gotta have a wide range of abilities, even if they're not all like exactly what you want to do. You really, as a musician, and I know a lot of pretty famous ones, you know, it's unusual for you to be able to do exactly what you want to do out of the box. And maybe that's the way you become the biggest of the big, because you just like, this is what I'm doing and that's all it is. But if it's a career you want instead, then you've got to get out there and try different things and put yourself in uncomfortable situations and get like a broad-based experience, especially when you're young. That's when you do it.
I agree.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up because what we were really talking about before was indie groups, perhaps, and obviously we don't have bands because if we did, we'd have more people here. So for you to address what you should do as an individual to get yourself ready for the business. Anybody have anything else to add besides the obvious? As an individual, how we stress in school all the time, networking, networking, networking. And that's how we try to introduce the students to this. But what happens once they walk out of this door? Any suggestions as to how they can become a part of that community?
Well, once the artists that are like one step ahead of you guys in that whole scenario start to see what you can do, guess what? They tell their friends. And, you know, it goes back into this thing where, hey, this person, you know, I saw him doing backup vocals for a Wilco side project at Chicago Theater or whatever. And all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, you should call them. Yeah, they were really good. Who's got their number? Well, I know that guy. I mean, as you alluded to, the idea isn't that you can be like the greatest like singer ever, but if nobody knows it but you and your friends, you won't be able to turn it into a career. That's pretty much my beat on it. You've got to be actively looking to network and taking advantage of it. But you know, you can network all you want. If you don't prove to people that you've got a certain amount of talent, then it's not going to work. But if you do have the talent and you just lay back and wait, I'm telling you, there's like even in my job, there's like kids nipping at my heels all the time, trying to like, you know, knock us out of the block. We've got massive corporations trying to squash our company, you know, billion-dollar international. And it's just like, you've got to find your mojo or whatever you want to call it, and believe in yourself, but you also have to work it. You can't lay back. It's an aggressive pursuit if you actually want to make it as a musician, and that's, I guess, you know.
I heard what Tim was saying earlier about that one group, Kids These Days. You know, and there's like another band I really like here in Chicago, and I work really closely with. They're the Oh My's. You know who they are? So, I mean, you know, in a way, those projects kind of came out of high school and college, but they ended up on the stage at the Hideout, and they ended up on stage at Double Door, and ended up on stage at Metro. And inside those groups was Vic Mensa. You know, the guys, you know, SEMA. I mean, so there was very interesting sort of juxtaposition of artists that were, you know, able to perform live, and to kind of thread the needle with what Andy's saying is that they had their chops. They really did know what to do, either in a studio or on stage, because they were proficient at what they did. But they also had the ability to perform in the public eye. I think that's the blend or the hybrid that is the tough part, maybe. Some people don't like to be on stage. I remember, you ever know this artist named Liz Fair? Do you know who she is? Liz had stage fright for years, and she kind of got over it, but you know, it took time. But you know, she was making good records. She spent a lot of time in the studio, but you know, stage fright was a real issue for her. She got over it by performing, by getting out there and doing it.
One thing I'd like to say a little bit about the way I started in the business. Graduated from college with a degree in voice. I'm playing for two church choirs, playing piano. I'm working with a top 40 band, playing 5 nights a week in little clubs in Northwest Indiana where I grew up. One night, I'm also working for the Lyric Opera, who's our sponsor here. I worked 2 years in the chorus of the Lyric Opera, coming up right out of college, doing all these very diverse things. A guy from Chicago walks in the club in Northwest Indiana and said, "Man, did you ever think about doing commercials?" I was like, "Nope, never thought," and I really had never thought about it. Never. It never entered my mind. No, it was a producer, a music producer, Jerry Lilliadow. Started bringing me into his office and said, "Okay, this is the way this business works." Introducing me to other session singers. I worked my first session with some of the top singers in town, 1980, and just like you said, they start spreading your name. The next thing you know, it snowballs. I quit my middle school teaching job where I was a junior high music teacher, quit the band, I started focusing on session stuff. Then you start doing that, then you meet record people because they want to, who are the top session guys when they come to town? You meet record people. Now you start doing that. So that's the way it happens. It's just, one thing I talk about all the time with my students, multiple streams of income for a independent musician. I say this every day. You got to get out there and do a bunch of different things because when this one shuts down, this one gets hot. This one shuts down, these two get hot.
That's good advice.
Bobby and I talk about it all the time. You know, I'm always running. I'm always doing a bunch of different things. And I've been that way for almost 40 years, doing the same types of things. And one thing will open another door. Then that door closes and it opens another door.
Like Jeff, you mentioned Ira and Telus, right? He used to be at Leo Burnett. And he did big commercials for big
And
United
I
Airlines,
was on them all.
McDonald's. Exactly. Now
I saw them all.
I'm putting it
And
together.
he used to teach at Columbia.
Right. So Ira did. Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And now he has his own studio
has
at
his own studio.
1644,
Yes,
the
he
Engine
does.
Studios.
Yes, he does.
Exactly. It's a community. You hear what we're talking about. I didn't really know this gentleman until we sat up here, but now I know who he knows. And so, it's interesting how that lattice, you all have that in front of you as well. It's around you.
Yeah, it is the best of times, though, and it is the worst of times. So we talk about the commercialization, corporatization, but really in Chicago, we still have this whole community vibe, all right? And you're living in the greatest time right now. So right now you're overwhelmed, you're in college, you're like, who knows me? I don't even know myself. What am I gonna do? How do I get started? You have around you, and we keep thinking about Chance and Donnie Trumpet and all that. That group of people, Macy and Seema and all that, those guys exemplify how groups of people can just do things. And when Chance, when he goes to the Grammys, I mean, he might be the first artist to be nominated without having a major label, a major record deal. Okay, so he is not, he is taking a whole different path. He is totally independent. And so he's right from here. And so what I'm saying is that you can do this. But here's the thing you need to think about. You need to be thinking about, we keep saying you need to do the work. Okay? So you're living in the worst of times where you can make a YouTube video and the next minute you're Justin Bieber or something and you think like, oh, I gotta have 10 million hits or something right away, And it's like a real career, a real artist, a real performer, we keep recognizing in Chicago is somebody who builds a life, And you do that, So when I look at people like Bethany Thomas, her, or Tawny Newsome. Tawny Newsome is a great singer, She plays in different bands. She also does comedy. She's out in LA now. She's doing billion-dollar properties, a fake reality show and stuff. But she's also singing in indie bands and stuff. And Bethany Thomas does plays and independent theater and all this. But it's like they have you build a reputation. So the overnight success playing in like the United Center tomorrow with, Beyonce or something, I mean, it can happen. But really in Chicago, what really is more likely that you can actually do is you could build this up. And what you need actually is you need one friend. Okay? It's weird, but you might be alone and a singer-songwriter, but usually there's somebody else, even if you do a YouTube video or something and somebody might contact you and go, I love your song, then you need to respond and go, let's meet at Hideout, all right? I want to talk to you. Because I notice all across, whether Nico Case, Kelly Hogan, the two of them would boost each other's spirits when they were bartending, And Nora O'Connor is you got there's these teams, Seema Cunningham and Macy Stewart, And then I look at there's Sarah Squirm, the comedian, and she's got her little hype girl, Julie, or Psalm 1 with Fluffy, And they're just you could do that, And then your friend, who might not even be a musician, they also might help you schedule events, and they might keep you on point. you know, like they might remind you, don't drink, okay? After the show, we'll do that, you know? And they like, but you throw things back, but they also help you book your shows and do stuff. And I notice most performers, if they have one friend, it kind of like helps them, you know? If you're in a band, that's great, you know? But I don't know, it's a little support, you know, but
So
you feel like you're alone.
What all these gentlemen are saying is that there can really not be a me unless I develop a we,
Yeah.
whoever that's going to be. Damn, I'm a poet and don't know it.
Again,
Still, yeah.
poet and don't know it.
Still, yeah. Oh, yes, Bob, Felicia. But you're always going to have someone that works with you in some capacity. And even if you are a soloist, unless you're going to do all your work like Bobby McFerrin, and even he doesn't do it alone because he still has a company of supporters. But it's going to start with developing a relationship with some kind of an instrumentalist, perhaps, unless you self-accompany. And then you're also going to need to know club owners and agents and other people who are interested in the same kind of music, the same kind of genre, and also people who just love you so much that they're going to promote you. They're almost like your publicity agents because they're going to say, I heard Jeff sing the other day in this club, and I understand he's going to be at the Metro. Let's all go see them because we're nothing if the seats aren't filled.
You know, it's another thing that Tim was saying about the best of times and the worst of times. The best of times is that when I first opened Metro in '82, there was no Facebook. I mean, my God. I mean, what a tool for self-promotion, a tool for letting people know what's going on with your activities, and then, of course, linking to music for free. I mean, you know, the technology that I think is at your fingertips, you know, and you may have a friend who's really techie. I'd buddy up with that techie, you know, have the nerd help you or vice versa, you know what I mean? I think that's really important because I mean, Facebook now, I look at Facebook all the time for artists. I look where they're coming from. And then of course, YouTube as well. But clearly the networking that Facebook can do for an event. I'm doing an event tonight. I mean, I spent the last couple of days strategically dropping in hints on who is going to be there, that Anna Furman's going to sing, that Tony Fitzpatrick is going to, you know, sign posters. We're donating money to Planned Parenthood. And it's like, I'm building an event. That's what I do. I'm a promoter. But it's the same thing on your end as well. You're going to be starting to build your own event. We're going to recognize that, and we're going to say, oh, that kid's got something going on.
So I had a lot of questions that included things like we hear incidents of bad behavior and what were their thoughts on it, but it's really something. You started out talking about character.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So sometimes we think as young artists, oh yes, I said we as young artists, that it's only about our voice, it's only about our talent. But obviously it's more than that because they were very explicit in talking about they watch your behaviors and how you relate. There was something very interesting that you said about bartenders and the like. A lot of times the owners of the clubs, the venues, the concert halls aren't even there. And they usually find out from the bartenders and others just how did they present themselves on stage and what
Absolutely.
was the audience's reaction.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's very true.
Yeah.
In my case, it is.
Yeah, that happens all the time.
I asked the sound guy. I missed the opening band. How were they?
Yeah, the band, the staff,
player was
everyone,
killer,
they're
singer
always
was great,
telling us, and
drummer
they're
was
telling
loud,
us.
that kind of stuff.
They're also downloading your music, and they're playing it during their shift. So everybody now has like an iPhone, and they just plug it in behind the bar, and they play their friend's music or the new music they just heard. So that's another way too. And and you do not be afraid to talk to the bartender, the staff, or anybody at a bar. That's what's great about Chicago, is just like you can just talk to people and just say, hey, my name is so-and-so, I'm in this band. And chances are they're in a band or something, or they're interested. If people are in a bar working at a music club, they pretty much are either musicians, they like being there, and they're into music, right? And then like the bands that play, Chicago's very accessible. Even for the touring bands tell us all the time, after the show, they like come down and they just hang out in the bar, and like don't be too shy. Like just be like, hey, how's it going? I love the way you play bass. I love that. I'm in a band. I don't know. And so if the musician that you're talking to is a jerk, and they're just like, yeah, okay, great. Then you're just like, okay, wow, really jerky people can make really good music, I guess. All right. Lesson learned again, okay? Or they might say to you, that's cool. All right. What do you play? And then, and it's not, and what is really great about modern times, what about our times, it's not as misogynistic as all the stories. It's bad. It's still bad. But it's really bands, like, they talk. Okay, and the reputation of Chicago is a pretty like equal kind of town. All right, where people in the arts and music, they'll talk to each other, not like trying to pick you up or something, And they don't think if you're a guy talking to a musician, you're like we don't all have an angle here, and it isn't, and people don't think everyone has an angle. It's just like you're a musician and you want to play and you want to talk about it, So sometimes I think when you're in college, you just, or when you're younger, there's a lot of images of the business that look really negative. But actually, it's way better than it used to be, and it's like really pretty good actually in this town. It's not LA.
Today there's more transparency, less, smoke and mirrors, at least the way that I perceive it now.
Is there any one thing that raises your antenna about a potential performer, good or bad?
Talent.
Demonstrated by?
Public performance, poise, relaxed, effortless. I see it, I can recognize it. 35 years sometimes a band the guitar may be out of tune, but I'm watching the guy and it's like, oh, he's got it. Just keep going. Okay, it'll get fixed. Sometimes that happens. I think that when we see a good performer, Andy, whether it's at the Hideout or whether it's at Metro, and then we see them at Chicago Theater, and even if there's a mistake, and we know it's a mistake because we're familiar with the material, you just watch the way that's handled. It's sort of, you know what I'm saying? There's that effortless, there's that poise. You don't get frustrated. You just kind of just play or sing through it. There's the next bridge. There's the next chorus.
That's right. That's kind of what I was going to say. One of the things I always look for is how someone handles themselves in a pressure situation.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
That's going to tell you tons. Do you want this person standing beside you in a Wrigley Field when you're playing in front of thousands of people and they panic? They tighten up when things hit. I can remember working a few months ago in a big venue in Boston, and I turned to the first song after the overture in this set. I'm about to do a duet with Aretha Franklin. I'm doing it again this coming weekend. I'm about to do a duet. I turned to the singer next to me from Chicago, and I said, I like the pressure. I like pressure. And I smiled, and I just had a ball.
Sure.
That loosened up everyone around me. Everyone. Okay, well, let's do this. Let's jump in and do this. Right. How you handle yourself under pressure. And what's the best way to handle yourself under pressure? Goes back to the first thing I said, be prepared. My mother gave me some advice that I'll never forget. I was about 17, 18. I said, okay, I'm going to college. I'm going to get a degree in voice. And what am I going to do then? She says, I don't know, but be prepared. Be ready. I was like, excellent. That sounds simple enough. Excellent. But you know what? I did everything I could to prepare myself. When I got done with school, I'm in my room back in 1978. Before multi-track recording, I had two-track reel-to-reels. Starting to understand how to multi-track record. I said reel to reel to some students a couple of weeks ago, and they were like, what is that? I mean, does everyone know what a reel to reel tape machine is? Spins like this. I record one voice part to one track, then recorded another voice part to another track by putting a piece of cardboard between the erase head. Took those 2 tracks, bounced them to the other machine. Whole different machines, 2 tracks. Now I got 3 tracks. Now I record, put the paper in for the erase head to block it, record another track, bounce it back to the other machines. And I kept doing that so I could understand multi-track recording. There was no Pro Tools. There was nothing where I could do 96 tracks of vocals. But that's how I did it, by bouncing back and forth. And it sounded like this. But I could hear the harmonies, and I could understand, okay, that's the way I sing with myself. That's the way I mix with myself. I blend with myself. That's how I did it.
So it's an exercise.
It's an exercise. It was an exercise.
Cool.
So then when you get to a studio, Universal A was open then. I don't know if you remember that on Walton.
Yeah.
Yep, Universal A was open then with the big rooms, 24 tracks. I'm like, oh my God, when I walked into, I'm in the big time now, there's 24 tracks here. So now we laugh at that now. Now you can do as many tracks as you want in a recording with digital recording. So be prepared. And another point with that, the whole be prepared thing, you guys remember when it switched from analog to digital technology? And I can remember clear as a bell, a lot of engineers going, oh, that's not gonna last, that digital thing is a fad. Right out the business, right out the business. And the young guys walked in, took over, specializing in digital recording. So be prepared, whatever it is you do, be ready. My mother's advice was great advice, and I laugh about it with her all the time now. I was like, you were right, be prepared.
Chase Smith, Rhymefest, he says about Chicago, and it's something that I think about when I look at musicians or performers. He said, I was asking him, we did this thing with Robbie Folks, who's a country singer, nominated for 2 Grammys this year. And here's Rhymefest, who's won Grammys and an Oscar, for the soundtrack from Selma. But I asked him, like, what is the style? What's the Chicago style, Like, what are we, more hip-hop, house? Are we blues, jazz? And he goes, no, man, Chicago's not about a sound, it's about a sensibility. And that's what he was saying. He's like, it's a sensibility, man. Are you for real? Are you authentic? If you are, if you do country, if you do blues, or if you do hip hop, Frankie Knuckles and house, you're doing it with like a sense of like, you believe in it. You love this. This is real. Yeah. And so we're not stuck into one genre. And you'll find with different performers, it's better now than ever. All right, it used to be much more separated, right? And now you'll see different performers that are hip hop or are singing with different rock bands and stuff like that. It happens a lot more,
To that point.
It's cool.
To the point. This shows you how things cross. Robbie called me about background singers for that project. I recommended background singers that worked on his project.
Seriously.
Seriously.
Cool.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And yeah, like an epitome, that is so awesome. And that, like an epitome of that is like Mavis Staples recording her albums with Wilco, okay? So, I mean, in New York City, they joke about, Queen Latifah jokes about Wilco, right? And then here in Chicago, it's like, no, man, Wilco, man, is playing with like, they're talking to Chance and different people, and they are working on different projects,
Let me say something about Wilco real quick, because there's a bartender at Metro that plays horn with Wilco.
Yeah.
Max Crawford.
David Max Crawford.
He's a bartender at Metro, but when Wilco needs a horn player, the power horns, they go out and do it. But he gigs almost every weekend with Expo 76 or Kelly Hogan.
That Dave Max Crawford will be at the Hideout tonight.
There you go.
With Expo 76, a cover band with Kelly Hogan, because you do gigs like that. You do like fun cover, and then
he will tend bar at Metro for an early all ages show and then head to a gig. Does it all the time. He's been doing it since he moved here from Austin.
Yeah, he was at Poi Dog Pondering. Yeah,
exactly.
And then like Kelly Hogan, who's going to sing tonight with Dave, she's like what you were saying, like she's out with the Decemberist, She'll tour with the Decemberist, with Nico Case, with Mavis Staples, And then she'll do her own stuff, too. So
gentlemen, you have given us all some food for thought, but perhaps there's some dessert needed, and the way that we get that dessert is by asking for questions from the audience. So we have about 15 minutes to dedicate to that. Questions? Do we have a microphone?
Hi guys, I'm Tomas. Thank you so much for talking to us today. I wrote my question down because it's long. Okay. As a vocalist, I found that there were artists who were trained more as recording artists, working closely alongside producers and sound engineers, developing new sounds and taking control of the current wave of music. There are also a lot of students at Columbia who focus on climbing the ladder through their courses. In regards to working with ensembles and working with bands as we should. My question is, where is the medium? I feel less likely to perform at a venue because I don't have a band, yet the scene for SoundCloud and other digital platforms permits me to upload music at any time. What's the most efficient way for a student such as myself to diversify between both markets?
Don't get caught up in only being a recording artist.
Yeah.
Don't do it. That's the key. Remember me talking about the multiple streams of income? If you do that, first of all, people aren't going to know for sure if you're a singer or not, if you're real. A lot of the work that I do as a vocal producer, I'm working with actors that aren't real singers. And I spend a lot of time at a board sitting next to an engineer with Melodyne and Auto-Tune. Get out there, get with some of your friends, even if, like he was saying, be a background vocalist. Get out there and get exposed. You want to hang with other singers. You want to get into those, it's not really clicks, it's just you want to be exposed to other singers. A new hot singer comes to town, the singers that I work with are going to tell me, especially if it isn't their same voice part. There's a new tenor in town, you got to hear him. And I'll go, okay, I want to hear him, and I'll search him out. But you got to get with other singers. Volunteer to be their background singer for some things. Volunteer to work on their projects. Then when then you have things you do, then you can interact with them in other ways. You got to get out there. You want to get that balance, and you get that balance by putting yourself out there.
Thank you.
So I'll just, I hear the balance, and that's what I believe in too. But you decide where you want to go. I mean, there's people who would rather do movie soundtracks. They would rather work in the studio. They'd rather just do vocal stuff. You know, that's whatever, Daft Punk or I don't know, you know? And so you could be huge without doing live performances nowadays, right? And so that if you want to do that, you know, but if you want to do, we think a better artist is like do live. It's enriching and it's helpful, and you learn from the pressure of being on stage and being with other people. And we think it helps you at least as a student. It will help you to see what other people are doing in the moment. It's game day and you're on, right? And that can only help you when you get into the studio and you're all alone. So you can do it with electronic media, whatever. But we just think a balance might be a better way to go, and it's going to enrich the student, person.
Well, I'd like to add that, like, unfortunately, the singer is only a part of what a major pop song is about. The guy that writes the song has got, you've got to have the meeting of a lot of different, like, angles on something. I could hear, like, the greatest voice ever if it's not attached to a song that's, like, serving, and it's like, you unless you're a songwriter, I guess is what I'm saying, and a singer, then I don't think operating in an invisible studio is any way to go about, trying to launch a career. Now, if you can sit there like Prince and, like, rock out like your demos by yourself, or just even if you're using computers and stuff, if you've got a great voice and you can write killer songs, then you know what? I don't know if I would waste my time going out and playing and networking stuff. I just post a YouTube clip and that happens, But if you're not that guy or that girl and you're not the full package, then that would not seem like a realistic strategy to me. And I would go back to what I said earlier, and what we've all been talking about is for the non-genius, world-class songwriter, singer, next superstar in the making, you've got to go out there and look at all the angles and involve yourself in all the different facets of how you do ultimately maybe get to the same place. But I'm not poo-pooing what you're saying at all. You got some killer tracks, and you sing your ass off, go do it,
But let me add one other thing. And I don't talk much about this. I don't care a lot for live performance. Never have. But do I do it? Yes. I would prefer to be in a studio working on arrangements, whether it's, I do a lot of R. Kelly's arrangements, whether I'm doing record stuff or commercials or something, I would rather be in the studio. But this goes back to that multiple streams of income as an individual artist. You gotta do those other things. You gotta do it.
Are you a songwriter as well as a singer? Okay, so that's great, because that then gets into the idea that either you're going to perform your own material or you're going to give it to someone, right? So you are probably heading in the direction of finding a band or a vehicle for yourself. There you go. I think so that your question's answered about, and it is the blend of both the perfect studio sort of moment and then the mistakes that happen in real life on stage that, quite honestly, I think you'll learn a lot from that experience as well.
And you have a great look. I mean, why wouldn't you want to be on stage? Look at you. I mean,
He's
you look like a star.
He's handsome.
Yeah, you look like somebody that would be on stage performing in front of big crowds. So start working on that a little bit at a time.
Tomas, I've been at practically all of the master classes and panels that you've been at. And in every one of them, you take that mic, you say, thank you for presenting this, and we're happy to see you, or come have lunch or something. And then you say your name. You always introduce yourself. So that's one of the first steps, is introducing yourself to people in person. Some of the best people that you admire, I saw you do your impression of Prince. How many songs did Prince write that have been recorded by other people?
That's right.
So don't you want to do both? Wouldn't you want to get that royalty money and that publishing money? As well as have someone give you the applause for what you do. I love being on stage. I'm not like him. I mean, I come alive on stage.
My friends all love to be on stage.
I come alive on stage. I love applause and smiles and that kind of thing. So you have to find something of value in every stage. That's why I started out by saying all the places where I perform. The eggs and the bacon love it when I break out into song. So when there's a light on, I perform.
Because if you've ever seen her perform, you know she loves being on stage.
And you will
she
never.
Loves it.
I mean, students, don't I treat that classroom like it's a stage? I never stop performing because I love it so much, and I can keep your attention that way also, because it's a trick I use everywhere I go. So I'm just simply saying, don't discount any stage, because you never know who's going to be in the audience and says, you look like somebody who can. You sound like someone who should. So I would just simply say what I think it was Jeff who said at the beginning. Don't just identify one thing, especially at 19 years old.
Absolutely.
Another question? Oh.
Thank you all for coming out and speaking. I'm Connor. I'm a musician from the suburbs of Chicago, and as a suburban musician, I feel that there's less opportunity out there than there is in Chicago. And I was just wondering what you guys thought, if it is an important step to move into a city where you can connect with more people, or if I'm just looking in the wrong places of the suburbs.
I don't think you have to move, but you got to drive.
Yes.
That's true. There are promoters here in town that do work with a lot of suburban artists and suburban bands. Shoeshine Boy Productions. There's a guy that I know does a lot of suburban acts. Swizzle Tree Steve is another one of these guys. You'll probably be able to find it online. These companies, and they work a lot with suburban bands. Just the word for
There's a lot of suburban bands, all right? They just don't want to admit it once they move downtown or move to Brooklyn. You know, the Orwells and all these guys, there's a lot of bands. And actually the suburban scene, Kanye West, Olympia Fields, all right? So you never hear that. So there's a lot of suburban people, and it's all a big mixture. We always joke, we're metropolitan, man, you know? So don't call yourself a Chicagoan if you're from Naperville, but like,
that was in the news recently.
There's a lot of people, there's a lot of interaction, you know? But you definitely need to come into the city, because we have more concentration of clubs, agents, labels, all that. The suburban, it's sprawl, right?
I just don't know
But
there are many suburban clubs anymore. I mean, really,
I don't think there are.
used to be more years ago, but I don't think there is anymore.
Yeah, there used to be a lot of big suburban clubs.
Like
We used to have to drive
McGreevy's
to-
and,
Yeah.
you know,
I have
yeah.
to say, if I was your age, I'd move downtown.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, that way you can go to things that you might be on the fence about. You can take a risk, and like, you know, the great thing about Chicago, having grown up here, is, I mean, you know, a bar on every corner. I mean, how much better could it be, right? You know, I remember, you know, on the Northwest side, that was the story. I mean, and so like, you know, there were ability right now to live in this city and like take chances on things where all you got to do if it doesn't work out is walk 2 blocks back to your apartment. I mean, you know, you'll be out way more, you'll be in it, you'll be meeting more people. I mean, I wouldn't be able to understand why that wouldn't be a good thing. Maybe I'm, you know, looking at it like old school, but because it gets back to my idea of you've got to be out there and you've got to have face time as a part of your, you know, your outreach to, you know, getting all your options, having all your options available to you. And you just never know, you know, like Joe and Tim and I can, you know, pretty much all agree on one thing. You know, if we're at a show and we see a band, we don't know who they are, and they're really good, you know, we're going to take the time to go back and introduce ourselves. I may never work with them because I work on big shows, but he will, and and we want to get in front of people's face and tell them, wow, you're really good.
Yeah.
And if you see us at a show and we don't do that, then that's not a good sign. But you know, I mean, I think the idea is that you're in a city. I mean, I just got back from spending a week in Los Angeles. Literally every place I went took me an hour to get there. It was just ridiculous. I hate it out there. But New York and Chicago, it's a totally different thing, and especially Chicago. You know, you can. I mean, I cab around at night sometimes, and I'm 10 minutes from this bar to this bar or whatever. Or if you live in certain neighborhoods, it's even more accessible. So I would strongly suggest that, you know, all things being equal, and finances are part of it or whatnot, but, you know, I'd live downtown.
Let me tell a quick story, because this is the triangulation of Tim, Andy, and I. Andy and I were doing a show at the Chicago Theater, and the support band that was on with Jenny Lewis canceled. And so she called some friends of hers in Minneapolis, the Orange Blossoms, to step in.
Right.
I went early to hang out with Andy, see the show. I see the opening band. I was blown away. Jenny Lewis, the headliner, says, Joe, you really ought to keep an eye on them. They're really good. Well, Tim booked them. I don't know, what, a few weeks later? We all came out to see them, you know? That really happens. I mean, that's what we do. And, I mean, I can't wait to have them come back and play their G-Man or Metro. We're going to find a place for them. So I'm just saying, as far as that, you know, we're looking for you.
I'll say this. You heard me mention earlier, I'm from Hammond, Indiana. Hammond, Indiana. There are 2 pretty busy musicians out of Hammond, Indiana right now. I wasn't the best singer in my neighborhood. I wasn't the best musician in my neighborhood. Myself, 40 years later, I'm still busy. Crystal Talaferro, MD for Billy Joel, percussionist, background singer, sax player. We were in battling bands. We lived a street apart.
Wow.
It's about getting out there, getting yourself recognized. This goes back. You see here this reoccurring theme?
That's awesome.
However, I think that you're probably in the suburbs because someone mentioned finances. So you might have to be a commuter, but you know you're going to have to put in those long hours back and forth. And you have to realize that it's worth it to travel, and you can't drink because you have to drive. And then when the opportunity presents itself, then you can move into the city because it is expensive to live in the city. Just being practical, fellas.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here again.
And you are?
Connor Richie Dunham. And I'm a singer, songwriter, a multi-instrumentalist. And I have been thinking a lot about what you guys are actually saying, which is about just going out and spreading yourself for as many opportunities as possible. It seems like there's always somebody like with a negative attitude out there saying like, oh, it's hard, this is so hard to do that, and you can't do this, and like it's really hard to get all this money, and there's all these things you have to do, and it's like, oh my God. But hearing what you guys are saying, and something I've been thinking about is just possibility thinking. Like where I am right now, like what are all, like can I just sit down for a minute and think of all the crazy things, like things that I never thought to do, like can I do commercials, like just approaching people, things you wouldn't automatically think to do. So I was wondering if you guys could just talk about that, like this mindset of what could I do next, not like, oh, it's so hard to do everything.
Options. Just, examine your options and manage your expectations. I think is also an important thing. Some bands are really happy once they can sell out Metro, and they've done it. They've reached the mountain. Others need to go beyond that or whatever. But just say, look at all your options. Examine your options. Go for it.
There are always going to be negative people. Now, I'm going to tell a quick story. When I was doing commercials, and I was doing 5 sessions a day in the 80s and 90s, all day long, one genre to the next, all day long. And I can remember one of my close friends had moved to LA trying to be a star, and called me and said, man, you are such a sellout. Doing hamburger commercials and doing, Frosted Flakes and doing cereal commercials. And I said, hey man, that's your opinion. I'm happy doing what I'm doing. Years later, he comes back from LA. Man, can you get me on a couple of commercials? I need to. And I did. I got him on a couple of things because he's a talented guy. Get out. This goes back to the get out there and just do several things, because you know what? Doing those several things, you're going to find out what's going to pop for you. Yeah. I had no idea. If you would have told me 30 years ago that I would be doing all the things I'm doing now at the age of 61, I would have told you were crazy. I am working all the time, every day now, whether it's doing voiceover projects that I do every day, every morning, before I go to work, or arranging or producing or whatever I'm doing. You have to get out there and find out what's going to kick in for you. Whether it's going to be a background singer, whether it's going to be voiceover things, whether it's going to be singing on commercials, whether it's going to be records. But you got to get out there.
Start knocking on the doors.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Chicago, we keep talking about the community. That's when you get into the community, because you start working and getting out there and doing stuff. We're also surrounded by 3 million people that have a second city mentality. And they're like, oh man, you can't do that in Chicago. Who do you think you are, Who do you think you are, Jay-Z? You can't do that here. And so we're always negative on each other. And that's why Kanye had to go to New York and had to be with Jay-Z. And Jay-Z's like, you got it happening, man. You are amazing, right? And here, we're always putting down our fellow friends. So when I told you, you got to get one friend that you can relate with, sometimes your one friend says, you suck, okay? Whatever. And you will be depressed. But you gotta be like, okay, let's talk through this and figure this out. But you gotta stay strong. and you got to stay positive. And then what happens is you get into the group, you just start to see the community of people. All right, there's positive people here. But you're going to be surrounded by naysayers. The suburbs are filled with them. What, do you think you're cool? What are you doing that out here for? All right? And then you're in Chicago. Go to LA if you think you're going to be a movie star. We do that to each other, and we think we're being honest with our friends. But we're beating each other down. That's why when you can take that, that's why Chicago musicians, artists, actors have a reputation for being tougher. We can handle that. So, like the last president, he was from Chicago. He could take a joke, all right? And he could throw it back, okay? The new guy, New York, all right? He's got issues, all right? He really, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. The Chicago style, you're gonna have haters, and you might come out of it, though, as the guy with more class, smarter, better, you know? That's what you just gotta do. People, when I think about the Smashing Pumpkins, okay, Joe was instrumental in those guys because Joe stuck with them. People used to go, who does Billy Corgan think he is? Is he Bowie? Does he think he's a superstar? What the hell? He's acting like arena rocker. Say stuff like that, right? And Billy and Joe were like,
he was an arena rocker.
He was, he did it. The Smashing Pumpkins. And they're like, he's awesome. He's like, he just kept doing it and doing it. He believed in what he did, and now he's, you know, legendary, you know? And you'll see this story over and over from Muddy Waters to Willie Dixon to Mahalia Jackson. What are you doing singing in a storefront, Mahalia Jackson? Going all the way to the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, you know? And it's like, you got to stay strong, man.
And,
you know?
All this, we talk about how things tie together in Chicago. Everybody they talk about, half of them I've sung on some album. Dennis DeYoung, Peter Cetera. I've sung on albums with all these guys. Background vocals, because it's a community. It really is a community here. You can do a lot of things that you can't do in LA or New York.
No question.
Yeah.
And I have a daughter in New York, and I've got a daughter in LA that work.
That's it.
And I like what you said about when your friend was negative towards you, but then you gave him an opportunity.
Yeah, I gave him an opportunity in because that's that Chicago mentality. Okay,
You
man.
know what I say is when the door opens, bring everybody with you.
Yep.
Bring everybody with you.
I've had bands, man, I wanted at the Hideout, and they were just like a dive bar, no, you know? And then a couple years later, after their South by Southwest Buzz Band thing wears off, you know, not saying that, but they'll be like, hey, man, can we get a gig? I'm like, yeah, I remember down in Austin, you were like too cool for words, right? But you know what we're like? We're like, no, let's give it a shot because we believe that like great musicians just can get better and better and better if they're for real, right? That's why Renee Fleming she's peak performance. Muddy Waters, 60 years old, you know, Mavis Staples, in her 80s. I mean, we believe in a career and a life and a
77.
community. Yeah, you know, it doesn't need to end. But when you're
Remarkable.
in college, you feel like, oh my God, I'm 20 years old. Oh my God.
My
You know?
shoes
Actually,
are
the world
20.
is open to you. Sorry.
Okay, it's about time to wrap it up, but there's something that I would like to end with, a couple of things. The first thing is when someone does speak to you negatively, you should just say to yourself quietly or maybe to them loudly, it's none of my business what you think about me.
Yes.
The next thing is you always say to yourself, okay, I don't like that song, or I didn't like that particular opportunity, but when you go to the bank, the teller never says, did you like that song? They cash that check and you're able to then move from the suburbs. So sometimes you might have to do things that are a little bit uncomfortable, but the most important thing about all of this is believe in yourself. If you believe in yourself, then you'll probably invite people who can assist you on this journey, who will be more interested in helping you than discouraging you. And those are the kinds of friends you want to cultivate. That's the company you want to keep. And I'm so glad to be in the company of these gentlemen. And will you show them how much you appreciate it? On a Saturday. All right, gentlemen, we are out of here because you're going to talk for 4 hours.
Well, I've been here my whole life, but I'm a pretty low-profile guy.
So I try to be.
Yeah, it's the only.